With the ban list hitting Shiranui, and also with the release of the Night Rose and Harry deck sets, has Shiranui really just gotten left behind? You may think so, but the deck has become much more resilient thanks to the adaptation of other cards that Dragon Empire has access to, and also within the Shiranui support in itself, such as Sekai, but also we got recently new support in the terms of Forbidden Eye as well. So what does Shiranui look like after the ban list and with the new support? Let's cover that right now. Check out Dueling Guard's deck boxes, playmats, and binders. They're great quality products that are anime based. They continually have more anime options becoming available. Use the affiliated link in the description for a 5% discount on your next purchase. I'll start off with the right line real quickly. Nothing has really changed. And then of course we got the Crestgiver and we have the Genkai. Genkai is still important because it's able to guarantee that unit that we can dominate if they try to empty their field out right before Oboro has a turn to actually revive. So that's key. It's also a good booster. This also can have additional pressure with the CB to give another 10k to that dominated unit. This actually comes up a little more because if you use the new order to be able to make Magantembu CB lists, then that can save you CB for this a little more too, flexible as well. And then of course the copy of Oboro. Again, you can use different arts. I'll cover the strides too as well. Also, if you want to support the channel, use the affiliate links such as like 50 Card Shop and other affiliate to get your cards for the next set coming up as well. I'll cover the strides quickly too. Most of the time, you're still going into Magantembu because it's generic. It also does what it does. It needs to cause a dominate and also retire problems and rear guards potentially too. However, what I realized, because we rely more on Sekai now, a card like Mukuro actually shines more too, is that when you're dominating your opponent's Vanguard, Sekai will actually trigger too. So that way, using extra soul, you can give your Sekai immediately another 10k. You get to draw a card as well. So you get to dig deeper on top of that. So there are actually practical uses with using Mukuro thanks to now being forced to use Sekai, which in tandem works out with this pair. 2 more copies of Oboro. You want to be able to go into Mukuro. Also great generic stride fodder. You could also re-ride if you do need the additional soul. So that's another option too, especially if you're aggressively going through it with all the Sekai abuse in the late game, but also this could be great against the prison matchup too. So I did reduce Peeling Dragon to 2, and so there's cards that you want to make room, which I'll get to, but essentially this is still good for Magantembu discard fodder. Again, if you go into Mukuro, this isn't used as much either. You actually use a copy of Oboro to go into Mukuro. You do play Asperidia, so the 15k shield can come up, but I've also reduced that too. But it's still a great card just to have discard fodder too. Some people play 3 as well. I just reduced it to 2 to make room for other stuff. And then of course we have 2 copies of Asperidia, so this is our generic restander. This gets around domination too. Most people with set 5 and now into set 6, they're not really using cards like Racing Angel Ladder, so you don't rely on it as heavily, which thank God. And it's also can be used as pitch fodder just in case if you need it. With the grade 2s, we do have 1 copy of Foray. Again, the ban list hit this to 1, so we got to do with what we got to do. He gets 5k continuous for every dominated unit that attacked this turn, so usually 10k, and if you do Mukuro, that's another 5k, making it 15 plus, not counting the Crust power up. So it's a really good card, so that's why I can see why I got hit to 1. But he still had his brother from the shadows, Sekai, and so Sekai really provides that gap that 4i left essentially, but it's not perfect. Like that first attack is not getting power if this is like your first stride, so it's kind of underwhelming to that degree. And also you may want a booster on the second attack if you do have double Sekai, because if your opponent gets a trigger, they're 23k base, so you may want to use that to hit for 23 and then eventually restand them and put triggers on them if that works out better. Again, with the Mukuro stride, you can activate this twice essentially, once on their Vanguard dominated, so they get the power, the draw, and then going into your turn, when your Vanguard actually attacks, this will restand, get another 10k and another draw as well. What's interesting about this card, since it draws a card too, I actually felt comfortable reducing some draw power cards for the late game too as well, while still making room for other cards to help with the early game to an extent too. With the early game, you want to use the grade 2 cycler, so that way you can actually draw into your pieces, you can guard with them, get an extra card that way too. That's still important. The other generic is Soaring Sun. I still play 4 copies of him because he's great early game. He helps fuel the soul as well, which you can abuse with Sekai later on. You actually don't have to CB. You literally place on hand and soul charge as first part of the skill, and then you have the option to CB one and call grade 2 or less from soul onto rear. This is cool because you can actually soul charge your restanders. I've had it where I soul charge my 1-4i and I can call it out immediately that way for later on. Also re-abusing of Shinri, that's super helpful too. You make beautiful 28k columns on turn 2 with Shinri too. And overall, it's just an annoying card that your opponent has to deal with in the early game. There have been game states too at like mid to late game where I just needed the soul and I just like call this card, soul charge, and then just call another card over it just to get the soul charge and be able to stand my Sekais, for example, or my Furai still. Into the orders themselves, 1 Bracing Angel Ladder. So I literally play this card for the soul. From time to time, the protection is appreciated. It just depends on what you're facing. Like if you're facing Varga, Shoulder Doji, the Domination Mirror, etc. too, you get to keep your Furais, your Sekais a little longer, so that helps with that extra turn. But again, 9 times out of 10, it's really for the soul. I've seen other deck lists play like Caliburn, for example. I mean, I understand that because you can draw 2 more cards. You can also countercharge. So it really just depends on your style and what you feel is more important to your deck, so it can still function against most scenarios or just even specific matchups that you're worried about too. Now onto the spicy part, we are playing 2 copies of Forbidden Eye. So this card, thank God we got it, because one, this deck could actually appreciate it. It's basically Spiritual Body Condensation, where you Energy Blast 3, you revive a card with stealth that is grade equal or less to your Vanguard currently. Typically, you're going to play this turn 3 and beyond, essentially. And unfortunately, you just can't call PG, for example, but that's okay. They want to abuse that for, you know, reasons. But it's good. You can revive your Furais again to be able to reuse them. You can get your Sekais. You can get your Shinris. What's cool is that you're activating an order technically, so you're guaranteed Shinri to actually pop off that turn. So you're guaranteed a 13k booster, but also it'll go into soul and draw you a card back. The other effect is really nice too, because if you discard this for Stride, you choose one of your Vanguards or their hearts and make their skill 1 CB less. So it makes Magen Tembu CB 0. So that means even if your opponent tries to damage deny you, you literally can get around it and still get that card face up in the G zone. This is good if you're fighting for first stride too, and your opponent sometimes will like, I'll give up first stride, and then like, oh, just make sure you don't have CB. And then it's all of a sudden you do this and they're like, oh man. And like you still get ahead of them in that point too. I've considered 3 too, but it just depends. I think if you're not playing Bracing Angel Ladder or some type of Regalis piece, I would recommend the 3rd Forbidden Eye at that point too. Again, you have a lot of orders and also blitz orders, so you can figure out the shield value and also like how often you can activate them per turn pretty easily, or if it becomes more difficult because you're having too many at once. So those are the factors that I think about. And in terms of blitz orders and defense, we have Defensive War. So this card, for a while, I did not play it, but I understood why people played it. And I've had the mirror matches where people play this too. So it's good for what it is. When you guard with this, you can choose one of your Guardians that doesn't have Sentinel, and it gets the red text. And it's once it's retired from Guardian Circle, it'll actually bounce back to your hand instead. So you can guard with fronts, OTs, maybe intercept with your Furais or Sekais, and then use this card to have those cards come back to your hand. So that's another way to get your Furai or Sekai out of the field back safely back into your hand, if you want to go that route. Or you could just reuse an OT defensive just to 1 or 2 card guard the attacks coming up essentially too. You could also do nifty tricks with like the grade 2 Cycler, where if you draw with the Cycler and then if you draw into this, you can activate it and then now choose the Cycler, and then the Cycler will come back to hand. And so you can guard with the Cycler again with the follow-up attack if you want to. So there's like a lot of nifty tricks that you can do. There's also a blitz order, so it gets around any like Sentinel restriction that comes from the hand. So that's something to consider as well. I've considered playing 3 or 4. I've seen lists that have played that too, but I think because with everything going on with the list already, I feel like 2 is still fine. I don't think I would go more than 3, maybe 3 at that point too. So it's really up to you. I also know that this card is not cheap too, so it's gone up in price too. I have a 3rd one already too, but it's just, you know, for players that haven't gotten this card yet. 4 copies of Shinri, so phenomenal card. I've already mentioned it with the synergy with Forbidden Eye. It's still really good. Great early game. Even in turn 1, this is like a 21k column with your Vanguard, and it makes like your opponent just take the damage. Pushing damage is really key for this deck too. And then later on, it's just a phenomenal booster, so definitely play 4 of these. So we're still playing at least 2 copies of Tenrei. Tenrei still has that draw power. This is a great early game because if you don't see Sword and Sun, this could be the other alternative to get a +1 that way. It also bounces back if a dominated attack hits too, so you can reuse the same Tenrei. That's also another reason why I felt okay with going down to 2 and making room for other stuff too. It's a decent booster too, a K booster that you can guarantee, but again, you have Genkai that will go back as well when you call it. And then if you have a Shinri, then the other spot will be 1 Tenrei as well. So you have enough room We are playing 3 PG and the 1 Sanctitude, so you can play 4 PG. One, because if you go to 3 Defensive Roar, I would take out the Blitz Order for Sanctitude and keep that. So again, you could only activate 1 Blitz Order per turn. So now you have to be conscientious if you want to use Defensive Roar or Sanctitude for that turn if you have both. So that's something to think about. For me, since I'm only playing 2 Defensive Roar, this situation doesn't come up as much. So I haven't had any conflict as much, if any, now that I think about it too. It's just being aware of when to use what and what, essentially, too. Going into the triggers, we are playing 4 effect crits. This actually does come up from time to time still. You can have this as a first attack booster, second attack booster, and then have it go into soul, so that way when your Vanguard swings, you can soul blast it out, and then also having like those soul blast spotter for your restanders, essentially. You can make some decent numbers too if you have like a 13k and then boosted by 8k. That makes a magic number with the additional 2k too, so that's something to think about, such as like Esperiata with a 10-ray booster. That can make a better number too. And we are still playing a crit total, so for vanilla crit, you want to have that crit pressure. However, what's new, and I've switched to fronts. I know I've been playing draws for like a year plus with this deck. Just very important for consistency and also getting your pieces. But now with Sekai in the mix, and also with like the lack of power that we don't have from Furai as much, I think fronts really shine more in this build. It's also 20k shield, so this actually synergizes well with defensive roar too. So then you have reusable 20k shield too on top of that. So a little bit of everything makes this front trigger much more feasible than the draws that I was playing before as well. I've also considered the new fronts that go into soul for additional soul fodder. I haven't really like play tested it with those just yet, but they sound nice on paper too. So if you're picking those up, you might as well try them out for yourself too. But I still recommend having like a crit because you still want to have that crit pressure. So, and for the OT, we were playing the purple OT. So this is still really good because one, we can't use the Dragon Empire OT with Shiranui because it's a choice restriction. So we're out of luck. But this helps guarantee a heal if we're at less damage than our opponent, which I typically play to have low damage, only take damage when necessary if possible. And then of course this can call something from hand and give like 10k and then an additional 100 million power, yada yada. So you can really like fix your field if need to be. But most of the time I just appreciate being able to heal. You can play the blue OT just to have the 9th crit as pressure and then recover something from the drop zone that way too. I could see a valid argument that way too. You just miss out on the heal versus having the crit pressure, of course. And then lastly with the heals, I actually was playing the effect heal, but I took it out recently and I need to find my actual other 4th heal. But this is 15k shield value. In the metagame that I've been playtesting recently, and even more so later on, there's stuff that is just all over the place. So it just dictate your metagame too. If you expect certain restanders, play the one that deals with restanders. If you have the crit pressure, do the one with the crit. But other than that, it's guaranteed 15k shield. Also with defensive roar, you are able to just maximize on this card and just worst case scenario. And defensive roar helps with recovering your bigger shield value cards anyway. So like small buffer that your effect heals might give you isn't like missed essentially too. But if we do go into a metagame that's like heavy in a certain way, definitely consider those effect heals, whether it be the 3-1 ratio that I typically do, or you can do the 2-2 split as well. So overall, I think the deck is in a really good spot still in the metagame. It's one of those decks where like it just adapts. Like this is one of the reasons I really like about this deck is that you can still play competitively, do well. As I was playing Night Rose and Rosemont for standard, I felt like this deck can still beat Night Rose even at full power, but even more so now. But Night Rose has a lot of matchup specifics and also like if things go in their favor too. But like Shiranui just has that power with domination, the crest scaling, the restanders taking advantage of the crest too. And it's just like ridiculous. Eventually you just outscale literally your opponent too. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this deck too. Have you adapted as well? What are some things that you consider that you might want to share with other people viewing this as well? Going into set 6 meta already being legal from this time of recording. And if you're interested in other deck profiles, check out this video I did lately as well. So next time, amigos. Bye.